Okay, how should Europe respond to Putin's aggression? Well, I would say, first of all, it's Europe's problem. Once again, not our problem.
Tough sanctions, though. Basically, that's true. It is long since time for us to pull the troops out of Europe. They've been there 67 years since World War II. They went in when Europe was poor and weak. Europe now is collectively able to defend itself, except the Europeans have figured out, and the favorite book in Europe is Tom Sawyer, because they have persuaded us to paint their fence and act like they were doing us a favor for 67 years for billions of dollars.
Right.
But I do believe what the Russians are doing in Ukraine is awful. I think economic sanctions are legitimate, and what the Europeans ought to be doing is joining in sanctions and probably putting some troops in Lithuania, Latvia, other democratic nations before Putin moves to kind of deter him. And yeah, they should be taking them.
In this video, Bill Maher quickly challenged former Congressman Barney Frank on a long-standing geopolitical conundrum when the topic of Russia's actions in Ukraine came up. Why is the United States still paying for Europe's defense? While wealthy European countries have comfortably avoided the expenditures of military buildup, American taxpayers have been painting the fence for Europe's security since World War II. Maher noted with his trademark blend of sarcasm and frustration. Never one to back down from a dispute, Frank pushed back, admitting that although Putin's actions in Ukraine are extremely concerning, Europe should bear the primary burden of opposing him. The two argued about economic penalties, military spending, and the aggravating fact that many European countries continue to depend on the U.S. for security after decades of pressure. Sharp, unforgiving, and challenging all political hypocrisy, it was a quintessential Maher moment.
I mean, you tried to pass a military reduction bill, and, it's very disappointing to see even Rand Paul, who I thought was our big hero on this issue, now is reversing himself. Something his father would never do.
I think
backing more military spending.
They're misreading the American people. The American people, I think, agree with us. They don't want us sending ground troops back in. This kind of scare tactic that the terrorists are going to come and destroy the country, I think is wearing thin. And I believe if we keep pushing, that you can make the case. That's my book is my theory about how you get back into, you get people to like government. Stop wasting $100 billion a year unnecessarily in the military. Do it to help people go to school. Do it to build roads. Do it to things. And I think if the right candidate says that, the public wins.
And one of the reasons why Germany, among other nations, can spend so much more infrastructure on green energy is because they don't have to spend on the military. We cover their military.
We subsidize it.
Yeah, we basically subsidize it.
Japan also. I want to be forgiving. I'm not always. 50 some odd, 62 years after World War II, I forgive Japan, I forgive Germany. They don't have to be disarmed. They don't have to rely on us. They can have their own weapons, and we can pull back.
Right.
According to Bill Maher, the debate surrounding Russia's aggression in Ukraine is just another instance of America being expected to clean up a global crisis that belongs to other countries. In this instance, Maher, who has long criticized the USA's propensity to act as world police, saw Europe as the quintessential freeloader, fully capable of providing its own defense, but happy to let Uncle Sam foot the bill. Maher's annoyance stems from a historical fact. Under the guise that European countries were too weak to protect themselves, the U.S. has invested billions of dollars and deployed troops in Europe's defense since the end of World War II. However, it was back then. Now that the European Union is a major economic force, Maher thinks it is ridiculous that prosperous, stable, and completely capable nations like Germany, France, and the UK still depend on the U.S. to prevent Russian aggression. He contends that rather than merely following along while America handles the heavy lifting, European countries should take the lead in enforcing economic sanctions and military deterrence if Putin is genuinely a European issue. Maher's deeper dissatisfaction with U.S. military spending lies at the heart of his argument. He has continuously called for America to cut back on its military commitments abroad, claiming that the funds would be better used domestically for infrastructure, healthcare, and education. For him, the idea that America must defend Europe forever, even when a large portion of the continent has rich social programs, sums up America's objectives in the most ridiculous way. When the U.S. could be investing in its own people, why should it still serve as Europe's security force? His criticism, in classic Maher manner, goes beyond policy to include hypocrisy. He finds it ironic that although European countries advocate for moderation and diplomacy, they covertly profit from U.S. military presence and defense spending. He also criticizes American politicians for using international threats as a pretext to defend excessive military spending. He believes that while Putin's aggression in Ukraine is a significant issue, America is not solely to blame. He contends that before the U.S. intervenes once more, Europe must take charge of its own security.
Absolutely. Okay, what explains the rise of the anti-immigrant National Front Party in France, and should we be worried?
Maybe the death of, over a dozen Jews in France. I mean, and
Cartoonists.
well, Jews at the supermarket and then the cartoonists at Charlie Hebdo.
Right.
I mean, that was a pretty significant event
Yes.
in France, and that can spur some maybe anti-immigrant sentiment. And I think Marine Le Pen is maybe capitalizing on what is some very real fear for Jews in Paris and liberals in Paris.
I agree, but it's also, I think, that exacerbated it. But I think it's the same situation we have again. I'm start quoting my book, but we have this problem with working people who have not had a chance to participate in the prosperity that comes forward because the economies in developed Western worlds have tilted in favor of people with high-end skills. So the people who 40 years ago could go to work in a factory and make a decent living, they have problems doing that. And I believe economic dissatisfaction is a large part of the Tea Party, and it's a large part of what's going on there. Yes, there is an
Please
element.
don't equate those two. Please don't do that. I don't think you want to make that mistake.
I didn't equate them. I said it's a large.
And ISIS.
I wasn't talking about ISIS. No. I'm talking about the Tea Party and the French right. That's the equation.
Oh,
That the
okay.
the dissatisfaction that's leading people to be so angry is I think, at root economic. And again, I'll go back. That's why I want to pull back $100 billion that we're wasting. I think I want to be the strongest nation in the world, but we don't have to be quite as strong as we are. And if we use that money to deal with economic problems at home, it would be good in itself and would alleviate a lot of that distress.
And to be fair, there is a comparison.
Bill Maher sees the rise of France's far-right National Front as a predictable, if troubling, backlash, driven by cultural tensions, economic frustration, and real fears about terrorism. To him, it's not just a French issue, but part of a global trend where disillusioned working-class voters turn to populist movements offering simple answers to complex problems. Maher views this as a clash of ideals. Europe celebrates openness and liberal values, yet many citizens feel globalization, immigration, and terrorism threaten their stability. Attacks like Charlie Hebdo and the Jewish grocery shooting weren't just tragedies. They were turning points that shook public confidence in open-door policies. But Maher also points to economic despair. Once supported by stable industrial jobs, many in the working class now feel abandoned in a global economy favoring the highly skilled. He draws clear parallels between the National Front in France and Trumpism, or the Tea Party in the U.S. Movements fueled by resentment, where blame often falls on the EU, elites, or immigrants, instead of the institutions truly driving inequality. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you tuning in for these lively, no-holds-barred discussions on politics, culture, and the issues that matter most. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more unfiltered debates, sharp insights, and the kind of real talk you won't find anywhere else. See you next time.